Thanks for joining us again today. Kirsten Kloss here with the Netcast event, and I have here once again in studio with me Chris Hamilton from Sales Tip a Day. The two of us are going to be interviewing Adam Metz. Now, I'll let Chris introduce Adam Metz a little bit more as we move forward here. But first, what I'd like to do is just give you a quick outline. What we do here, we interview authors that are, well, right now they're supplied to us by McGraw-Hill of sales and marketing content. And we like to get them on camera and discuss their book, but more importantly, a little bit more about what's behind their subject matter, a little bit more about them than necessarily just the book itself, because obviously you can read the book. So I'll just pass this on to Chris here and let him introduce Adam, who is live via a Skype call. We don't have him on video, we have him on audio, but he's standing by. So Chris, why don't you introduce Adam?
Sure, I will introduce Adam. First of all, I want to just hold the book up. It's Adam wrote a book called The Social Customer. And I'm just going to read your bio on the back here, Adam, so that people know who you are. Adam Metz is the VP of Business Development for Metz Consulting. So, Adam, how come you're not the president? I mean, it sounds like it's your company, isn't it? I'm pulling your leg.
It is my company, but I mean, I tend to concentrate more on the day-to-day of just working with clients. And, I mean, I guess running the company takes place on weekends and stuff. So in the day-to-day, that's kind of more my role. So I just figured, be honest about it.
Exactly. It's, so the other thing it says here is you've consulted with nearly 100 companies on how to acquire, manage, monetize, and retain customers from the social web. And as we discussed earlier prior to the interview, you live in Oakland, just 15 minutes from the downtown core of San Francisco. And you're there with your fiancée, Susan. And that's a high level on who you are. Is there anything else you wanted to add or put in there?
Actually, at this point, I've worked with more like 136, 137 companies. Just brought on a couple of new ones. I work with a software company downtown Oakland, a kung fu company here. I'm just starting up with an entertainment firm down south in San Jose. And yeah, just usually the clients that I work with are small and medium-sized businesses typically. I've done a few large companies like Hershey's. And yeah, we help them get customers from the social web, and in addition, I have a number of coaching clients as well.
Excellent. So you're a busy man then, I would imagine.
Yeah, writing my third book right now. Just putting out a new ebook next week. Yeah, so there's just a lot of stuff going on. It's all generally about helping companies figure out how to get customers from the internet.
That's excellent. I mean, that's a good segue into literally. Some of the stuff that I gleaned from the book, we'll go through these some of these questions here. But part of it is, I think the social customer is from our standpoint. When I started to look at this, I thought, oh, it's going to be all about online and stuff like that. But you've written more about the social CRM side of things. But the other side of it is, you got brand and brand tracking. So I think that was kind of one of the first things that you really talk about in the book. And if you could just kind of highlight. Your thoughts on brand tracking, why people want to track their brand, because especially in this day and age where stuff's being said about you online, you could be very surprised about what's going on out there.
Sure. Well, I'll just give you an example from last week. My phone rang. I was having breakfast last Thursday, I think it was. One of my old clients I used to work with at a large tea company. She now works for a food and beverage company, a pretty well-known one. They make a very popular brand of cereal. They make some snack bars that are really popular and Whole Foods and things like that. And they had a customer that was honestly kind of flipping out on their Facebook page in front of 22,000 people. Geez. And they were like, when the phone rings and it's a former client calling before 9 a.m., I'm usually like, did somebody die, or what's going on? What happened? Especially when it's a food and beverage company, I'm always thinking food tampering or something like that. Or we talked it out. We did a couple of sessions. We're meeting up for a third time next week. And the very first thing we did was I said, okay, well, where's your brand monitoring system? Let me log in and have a look at the damage. And they're like, oh, we don't have one. And I was like, well, you're not getting off the phone with me until you deploy at least a very basic one. So, in that initial phone call, we deployed, a very inexpensive but effective brand monitoring system for them so they could at least figure out, what are people saying about their brand on the social web on a minute-to-minute basis. So that was the immediate outcome.
So, like, you're talking about, is this your own system that you have set up, or is this using online technologies that are widely already available, Google and what have you?
Yeah, generally something like a Google Alerts isn't going to be appropriate for a company. That's just more like if, let's say you're a big fan of the Cincinnati Reds and you want to know every good new article that popped up about them and it wasn't time sensitive or for a business case, sure, use Google Alerts. That's just fine. But for anything that involves your livelihood, I would never go near Google Alerts. It's just not appropriate. So I set them up in that particular case. I think we used Hootsuite Pro or something. Costs about $20 a month. And, it's a very basic starter solution. I wouldn't recommend it for anything but a small business. But, if larger companies may use something like a Radian 6. They're now a Salesforce.com company. There's even very, very large enterprise solutions. So it just depends on what your needs are and how much of the internet you want to cover, whether it's just the basics like, say a few social networks like Facebook and Twitter, or whether you need to cover everything in real time and be able to have a 3-person team reacting to that in real time. So I'd say it depends whether you're Molson Coors or whether you're the little flower shop down the street.
By the way, I have to appreciate the fact that you mentioned Hootsuite, which is a Canadian company. You just mentioned Molson Coors, which is
also Canadian company.
Conglomerate of a Canadian company too. So
and I'm listening to Rush as we speak.
Amazing.
I'm just
and next you're going to be listening to Triumph, I think, or something like that.
Oh man, and I'll play at the end of the show. We have to play Roller by April.
Oh man, this is it's great. Actually, Canadians get really excited when Americans actually even mention anything about Canada. So we're really happy about that sort of stuff.
As long as you're not tweeting on your RIM BlackBerry right now, we're fine.
Yeah, no. Everything. I'm wearing my flannel, and I stopped by Tim Hortons on the way.
Oh, nice. Good for you. And you got a mullet too, right? So
absolutely. I've got my Dave Coulier here.
Excellent. Hey, so the other thing too is the concept of the social customer, right? What is your what do you mean when you talk about the social customer? Obviously.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that. I was on the phone with a pretty large law firm in San Francisco the other day, and they're like, "Okay, you wrote this book, The Social Customer, Mr. Metz guy. What is the social customer?" And I said, "Well, statistically, 73% to 90% of your customers are the social customer. What that means is they're using a form of social technology at least once a month.
Wow,
that's it."
So what was that stat again? 73% to how many?
73 to 90%. So if you need some statistics on this, you can use the Forrester tools. Yeah. So here's what I would use to gauge what percentage of your customers are the social customer. Go to Google and type in something called Groundswell tool. And so when you type in Groundswell tool, then what you'll find is a bunch of things on Google will come up. I'm actually going to go to Google right now and do it. So type in Groundswell tool. If you can do a little screencast there.
Actually, Kirsten's doing it right now. So.
And so then what'll come up is the top link should say Social Technographics Profile Tool. Click on that bad boy. It'll take you to a really nice
tool.
Google doesn't want to give it to me. Hold on. Keep going.
So here's I'll give you the URL. It's www.forrester.com/empowered/tool_consumer.html. Again, I'll give that to you. It's www.forrester.com/empowered/tool_consumer.html. It's right alongside a real nice book that was written by Josh Bernoff called Empowered. And so what you'll come up with here, it's a social technology profile tool, and it just takes about 30 seconds, and you can pop in the ages and the locations and genders of your customers, based on your rough data, and you can figure out, well, what percentage of my customers are truly a social customer? So I'm going to give an example. Let's say you make a soda that sells to mainly 18 to 24-year-old males in Canada, and so I'm typing in ages 18 to 24, country's Canada, and gender's male, and what I get is that 94% of those customers are social customers.
Yeah.
Wow. So that literally, that's amazing. That's a nice little piece of information that you gave away for free to our viewers.
Yeah, so it's real easy to use. So anytime, let's say your company's attacking a new market segment, and you want to know, okay, well, what percentage of these people are really social? Go to the tool and pop it in. And I think this data that you're looking at there is from 2009, but I have a hunch that Forrester actually updated the data in 2010. So I think the data is only about 1 year old. And I think good analyst firms like Forrester and the Pew Internet and American Life study, they usually update this data about once a year. So whenever you're assessing this, you can feel secure in that the data is at worst 1 or 2 years old.
But I mean, it'll give you a fair assessment, right? I mean, that sets you in your way. That's actually an excellent tool for people to use. I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting in a company and I've got at least some smarts behind me and stuff like that, and I want to go online, this is a great way to gauge what's the uptake going to be on what you do and stuff like that. So.
Or even knowing of the entire base you're marketing to. Like I remember I got a phone call from a woman in Minneapolis about 3 years ago. She was from the largest senior community in Minneapolis. And I was a little puzzled why she was calling, because I thought she was calling about the seniors actually in her community, because I think a couple thousand seniors live there. And these people are rather elderly, 80 plus, some of them had dementia. And she's like, no, Adam, that's not what I was calling about. What I was calling about is the children of these folks who are actually buying the apartments and condominiums for their aging parents. And she said, well, actually, they're U.S. citizens, they're male and female, and they're in their early 40s. And so we looked at the numbers, and it turned out that 8% of her customers were actually social customers, because that's the stat on Americans, or actually it's 83%, it's a little higher. So you really have to think, who's the person that's writing the check for your goods or services, and look closely at those numbers.
So I have a question. So I see a lot of advertising, or I hear a lot of advertising nowadays about this service called Reputation Builder. And so essentially that's somebody taking one aspect of internet noise and basically they're overlaying internet noise on top of negative comments. What's your feeling on that kind of strategy versus sort of a more proactive approach?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've seen a number of these reputation management companies, and they give you stats that okay, there's, let's say 20% of the world is on a social networking site. And, Facebook by itself is approaching 1 billion users very quickly. So yeah, I think it's realistic that 18 to 20% of the globe will be on just Facebook alone within probably by Christmas of this year. And so yeah, you have these firms that claim to be reputation management. And yeah, effectively what they're doing is they're going out there, they're trying to find if there's negative content about your company or your your brand, and they're trying to repair the damage by putting out sort of, I guess you would say, noisy or ineffective content, when what I think you can really lead with is real content. There's a guy who's actually really an expert on this, just on reputation management. He's one of my favorite writers. His name's Andy Beal. He's based down in the South. He wrote that book called Radically Transparent. I would definitely check out Andy Beal's website. It's radicallytransparent.com. And that book, I think, is one of the best books about reputation management. My recommendation strategically, whether it's for a small business or a larger one, before you go out and hire some company to do this stuff for you, at least read Andy's book first. It'll take one day. And granted, Andy's book is a few years old, but the advice in it, I think, is somewhat timeless.
So extremely relevant.
So yeah, that's sort of, I would at least start there, or maybe go to andybeal.com, and that's really Andy's niche, is just online reputation management. He's been on CNN, BBC, or New York Times, maybe not CNN, but just about every major pub. So I would take a look at that and spend a day looking at that before going out and spending $10,000 a month on a reputation management firm.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially now with with the online reviews and everything. Like Google, for example, finally just gave you the opportunity to go back and dispute anything that's put against you on your reviews. Whereas before, I mean, up to about 6 months ago, it was just take it or leave it. It was already there. It's nothing you could do about it, right?
Yeah, but that's potentially a mammoth task for Google.
Oh,
when you
big
think
time.
about it. That's opening up a can.
It is, but there's a good reason for it. If businesses and companies don't feel that they can trust the largest online advertising companies in the world, who also happen to be search engines like Microsoft's Bing, Google, even there's websites in South Africa and China that like QQ, Renren, big companies. If they don't feel that they can trust them to give accurate search results, why would they feel comfortable spending their hard-earned advertising dollars there?
Yeah, no doubt.
So it's really a two-way street. And I mean, the whole thing with this reputation management that companies are concerned about, they don't really care that much about their reputations. They care about, their earnings before taxes. So, but they realize that, in the social customer world, if you don't have good stuff being said about you online and on mobile, then you're not really going to sell anything to anyone. I mean, just think of some of these companies right now. Like I remember, with Occupy Wall Street yesterday, Brookfield Properties, they own that whole plaza out there outside of Occupy, where I guess the Occupy Wall Street protesters are. They had an opportunity yesterday to use some pretty heavy-handed tactics, but they didn't. And I think one of the reasons is because the backlash against Brookfield Properties online, who have a lot of probably prospective deals and bids in the marketplace right now, would have been overwhelmingly negative. So I think from a a social media perspective, they kind of made the right step there. And also you have American Airlines just the other day. American Airlines had a flight that was having some trouble. There was a passenger who was yelling, and there was a doctor on board that had to sedate the passenger. American Airlines chose to disable Twitter during the flight, which I thought was a little bit strange. There's a number of articles about this online. It happened
that's bordering censorship.
Yeah, it ran in Business Insider the other day. It's if you go to businessinsider.com and you type in American Airlines, I'm looking at the article here. I'm trying to see. They made some sort of response. They basically stated that they did and then they didn't, or there was no way it could have been blocked. Anyway, everyone on the flight was okay, thankfully. Yeah. But it was kind of a strange situation. So that, there's different ways to handle the social customer, both good and bad.
Oh, absolutely.
But these days, the reactions are usually very, very swift from the customer.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the whole thing with Kevin Smith when he had to buy 2 seats on was it Southwestern or whatever. Same sort of thing. The outlash from that was crazy.
Oh. Yeah, and I think it really did hurt Southwest's brand. On the other hand, they were a company, Southwest Airlines, that has been highly engaged with their customers even prior to social media. I'd say in terms of managing customer relationships from a high level, they've always been good at that. And I think because of their traction with their customer base, they rebounded rather quickly. Whereas had that been a different airline that didn't have sort of the previous, customer relationships, they would not have been able to rebound quite so quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a classic example that keeps coming up in periodicals and books that I've gleaned is I think it was General Motors that came out with this. They were toying with this idea of using the crowdsourcing to promote one of their Tahoes or something like that. Do you remember that, Adam? And
yeah, there was some
totally backfired.
Yeah, I'm trying to find.
It was the environmentalists. Didn't they get a hold of it and make fun of it? They had to build your own commercial or something.
They didn't use the technology properly. So I think that's a segue into be careful how you use the technology because it can bite you as hard as it can lead you, right? Yeah. So that's obviously the importance of having somebody who knows what they're doing guide you into that world.
On the other hand, two major consumer brands like Doritos and Coca-Cola have had pretty wild success with the same concept. So, I think, it really lies in the strategy and the execution in terms of how well they can do it. And at the end of the show, we're going to give away an online course that will help your company, kind of figure out, okay, if we want to do something with our social customers, how do we do it right and write the plan soundly before we launch it?
Absolutely.
One of the questions I also was going to talk to you about was, the whole concept of social CRM. So as we were talking prior to the show, a lot of the people that come here are kind of small, medium-sized businesses or even people that are playing or working in those companies. Now, we also have people that show up from very large companies as well watching this stuff. But the concept of social CRM to people is a foreign concept, but when you kind of explain it, people, it's almost like the light goes off and you go, I get it, I understand it. Can you give kind of a high level on what it means, and then potentially we'll go into kind of how you've come up with the 5 M's of social CRM and 22 cases of using it, and maybe what we'll talk about is just a marketing case and a sales case as to why it might be relevant for their world. So if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And one note about the use cases for social customer relationship management. I didn't actually come up with all of them. I came up with about 5 or 6 of them. Jeremiah Aoyang and Ray Wang, who used to both work at the Altimeter Group, they actually came out with the basic use cases, and I sort of took their model and added a lot of stuff to it.
And by the way, before you go into that, it's I'm looking on the book. I've got it marked here. It's page 54 is where it's laid out, and you do an awesome job of actually talking about this for literally almost 100 some odd pages just afterwards, going through the different cases. So it's and it's a very compelling, intriguing read as well. So that's why I'm putting the book plug in, because I think it's really good to actually understand that concept here as well. So
yeah. When I wrote the book, I got sick of seeing so many theoretical books on social strategy. When I grew up listening to The Clash and Black Flag and Jawbreaker and a lot of punk bands, and I think the thing that really inspired me was these bands they weren't telling you to go to Hollywood and get a big recording studio. They were telling you, okay, do what we do, just do it yourself and do it in your garage. And, you know, the band that did that the best, I think, that kind of woke up America was Nirvana. I remember, you know, when Nirvana's Nevermind came out, I was 13 or 14. And I think everyone I knew started a band after that. And I'm sort of trying to get companies to look at this, to look at social customer relationship management and first ask themselves, well, do we want our brand to be a social object? Because that's kind of the first question you have to ask before you even decide, should we do social customer relationship management? It's on page 13. There's like a list of questions here. And some of the key questions are like, well, does our company want to talk to our customers immediately and directly without a third party intervening, like a television station or a journalist? And does our company want to be able to directly engage with our customers on a day-to-day basis? If the answer to that question is no, don't read my book. Go read Treasure Island, or go read, you know, The Girl Who Could Fire. Like, I'm not going to be able to help you really. But that said, if the company wants to drive demand from their social customers on a daily basis, then yeah, absolutely. You know, keep rolling.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, when people ask what is social customer relationship management, well, it's pretty simple. It's creating and monetizing the conversations with your customers and your prospective customers and the people in your company's market, and creating new markets in order to drive revenue and outcomes.
Now, does this kind of strategy require a team or some dedicated people in the organization, or is this something that a small to medium-sized company, you know, with limited resources or limited time, can actually implement in their world, or is this something that you know, maybe is a better outsourced solution for someone like that?
I generally recommend actually insourcing it, having it within the company. And as far as teams go, I mean, from the data, I remember Jeremiah Aoyang kind of did a study of social customer relationship management and social media teams within companies. I'd say, depending on the size of your company, it should be the equivalent of 1 to 24 full-time employees. And if you need to divide that up, sure, you can divide it up. Like let's say you have a 4-person marketing team. Could you maybe have them each working on your social customer relationship management strategy for like a day a week? Yeah, I think you can cut it up. But trying to do something like this with under 1 full-timer's worth of resourcing, I don't see it being successful.
That's pretty tough, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, you know, if I told you, could you pack for a 2-month vacation in 10 minutes? Like, I'm sure you could like grab a jacket and a pair of underwear, but I don't know if you'd be so happy on your vacation.
Yeah, depends on where you're going, right?
Yeah. If you're going to a nudist colony, maybe.
Well, and just for those of you who are not aware of Jeremiah Aoyang, he's a web strategist, and that's a whole. That's a whole discipline in itself that's developed. It's a whole career developing on its own there. And you know, how does your product mix, or how does your material compare to that of a web strategist? Would they be coming to you for certain advice, or is this something that you kind of work hand in hand?
Yeah, I mean, so someone like Jeremiah, for example, you know, he used to be a Forrester analyst, and he started his own firm called the Altimeter Group. They're a real good firm. They're a research advisory firm based outside of San Francisco, down in San Mateo, and so they advise companies, you know, on strategies to help them thrive with disruptive and new technologies, and so that's kind of their niche. I collaborate with folks like them sometimes, and frequently, if a company has a web strategist who just isn't sure what to do about an emerging technology, especially one that's a social technology, that's where I think I could probably lend the most expertise.
Gotcha. So just kind of wrapping around, also your 5 M's of Social CRM in 22 cases. I mean, I do not. That's for people to buy the book and figure that sort of stuff out, right? But I mean, the buckets that you go into.
Actually, it's funny. That chapter is going to be available for free, and the reason is because so this chapter of the book that has all the basics of it, it's partially based on this open research that Jeremiah and Ray did about 1.5 years ago, and so in sticking with what's called the open research tradition, I too am going to make my research for that chapter open, so anyone can read it. There's no charge, and so that graph was sort of originated by their work, and then I stacked a lot of things on top of it too. So it's what you're looking at on page 54 of the book, that big diagram. It's kind of a mashup of their original research and about 7 or 8 things I added to it. So it was kind of like we were virtually collaborating, and they actually answered a number of questions for me in helping write.
Well, yeah, you're kind of living your prophecy. I mean, you're actually giving forward in your whole outlook on what you're doing, and that's sort of what people need to do in companies in order to gain trust and build relationships with clients. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever a company comes to me and says, okay, we're ready, we want to do social customer relationship management, I'll say to them, well, let's pick one or two of these use cases and do them really well, rather than doing 5 or 6 of these use cases in a really mediocre way.
So that leads me to my next question, which is how disruptive is something like this for a company, and how do you mold the culture, or how do you lead the culture of a company into this kind of I mean, it's a whole change management process, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, to try and do this without a few employees who have some sort of organizational change management certification could be real tough. And if you're looking into getting a couple employees, well versed in that, there's a good course that Cornell University in New York offers. It's an online course, actually. You can get a very basic cert in online change organizational change management, I think, in about a month, and it's not very expensive. So at the very least, yeah, I would recommend you have some people who are good at that. And then as far as how do you move the entire boat around, I'd say in baby steps. I mean, there are some companies like, HP, SAP, who originally really embraced the social web like a decade ago. Sun Microsystems is another notable example. Others were a little later to the game, like Google, for example, didn't really embrace social until a year or two ago. Now they have, the sixth most powerful guy at Google, Vik Kundrota. He's their social EVP. And, Google, even themselves, when they debuted Google Plus, their key execs were not using it. That's changed now. If you go on Google Plus, you can look for their CEO.
That's actually a very interesting observation, because, I would have thought that that Google would have been trying to lead the pack there, but I guess they weren't leading by example. I mean, they were introducing all of these products and introducing, what was it, Bing and various other attempts at social networking, but their entire internal organization wasn't actually involved in that process.
Yeah, so what happened was Google, actually, it's funny you should say that, they shut down Buzz today,
that's it, not Bing, Buzz.
Oh, is it Buzz?
Yeah.
Bing's
Microsoft,
I even
dude.
confused my yeah, right.
And they also shut down what was the other one, Jaiku, which they acquired about 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, they got rid of that too, eh?
Yeah, they did, and understandably so.
Yeah.
I mean, these were social customer services that just didn't really resonate with the social customer. So it's, what's the point of keeping them around? And yeah, I'm looking right now at Eric Schmidt's Google Plus profile, and so now he is indeed using the technology, and he's got he's engaging with 20,000 people on a daily basis, and that's kind of neat. I mean, just to be able to post a comment somewhere where the CEO of one of the most important companies in the world could see it, like that's one of the magical things about social customer relationship management, is that your customers now have a direct line to maybe your CEO, whereas before, what could they do? Send a letter that would get stuck on some receptionist's desk,
It's a lot of transparency, which is really nice to see actually out there. That's what makes the web so wonderful. Is the it's good, it's bad too at the same time with that sort of transparency though.
Yeah, there are positives and negatives, because, if you're going to do social customer relationship management, you have to be prepared for if your customers don't like something, like the food company that I was working with the other day. They made a minor price increase, this food company. It was based on the cost of raw materials. Like, you probably remember a couple of years ago when cotton prices went up and all the T-shirt manufacturers had to increase their prices by like 10, 15%. Yep. It was a similar thing. I think the price of one of the grains in their cereals increased. And this customer was absolutely livid. And they tried to call him. They tried to reach out to him. But in some cases, an angry customer just wants to vent. And, unfortunately, your kind of arena, whether it's, your Facebook page or whatever, might have to serve as the venue for that. And the marketing manager of that company, she said to me, she's like, Adam, I don't get it. Like, we've had such good luck so far. And I said, well, when was the last time you went to a big rock concert? And she's like, what? I said, well, when was the last time you went to a big rock concert? And she said, well, like last summer. And I said, okay, well, you went to a show at Shoreline Amphitheater. It's like our big outdoor amphitheater here in the Bay Area. And I said, how many people do you think were at the concert? She said, I don't know, like 20,000, something like that. And I said, that's right. I said, on your way out, did you see anybody who got arrested at the concert? And she's like, yeah, I think there was one guy who got arrested. He was like too drunk or something. And I said, okay, well, you have 22,000 fans on your Facebook page, and one of them made trouble. Remember, you were at the concert. There were 20,000 people there. One of them got arrested. Yep. I mean, those are sort of odds that you're just going to have to learn to live with.
Absolutely. The wrapping it back around just to the business case on this one, I specifically liked in the sales side is one where you talked about a new hire in a hotel, and just because we do have a lot of people that are in the sales side, also the marketing side, which I think this plays into. Can you kind of give just a high level on kind of the listening and what you can do and how you can leverage social CRM to potentially drive sales leads your way, I guess is the best way to look at it. And the flip side too is obviously if I'm sitting on the other side of the fence and someone's contacting me or sending me information almost immediately in my new position, it becomes almost creepy, I think, actually, from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, it's, yeah, you think of hotels. I remember seeing some story on Twitter about a year ago where some guy was waiting in line to check into a hotel in Las Vegas. I think he was in town for like the Consumer Electronics Show or something like that. And I've actually never been to Vegas, but I'm sure I'll go sometime. But anyway, he was trying to check in, and I think he got bumped. Basically, the hotel did not have a room available for him. They were oversold, even though he had a reservation. He tweeted it. Like 5 minutes later, he got a direct message on Twitter from a hotel that was 2 blocks away, and they're like, "Come on over. We'll get you right in."
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's the listening, right? That's what's going on.
Here's another example. The other day, I was on my way to Sacramento, California. It's about an hour and a half away from where I live. Just taking a little, kind of a local vacation with my fiance. I was curious about where to eat. I put a tweet up. We had 2 great meals because of people just in our network that we knew who just bam, like within minutes we had restaurant recommendations.
So it's the listening.
And so it's not just companies that are listening at that speed, it's the customers themselves that are listening at that speed.
Well, yeah, you get the evangelists from the client, from the customers. That's a nice thing to get.
Well, that's your testimonial network right there.
Yeah.
That's
and it's also that you also have help in doing damage control at that rate too. So let's say, for example, you owned a food company, and there was a rumor. I had a client, a pet food company, about 4 years ago that had a rumor that their food was tainted with melamine from the Chinese melamine tainting scandal. Turned out there was nothing wrong with their product; it was totally legit. But this happened before Twitter, before the social web really got big. If it had happened today, I think they would have been able to get the message out there that their food was completely unaffected. But because of what happened, they lost probably a few $1 million in sales. Wow. So, I mean, is there a tangible cost benefit to social customer relationship management? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite amazing what kind of information you can pull off right now. Same thing with I was actually working with a client out of Houston, a potential client out of Houston. I just realized this guy was kind of in his late 50s, early 60s, and he needed more personal interaction. So I basically put out online, is anyone capable of doing this in Houston? Literally within like 10 seconds, I got a flood of activity against this one and hooked him up with the person that I deemed was most appropriate to go and help them with that sort of stuff. So works very well.
Yeah. And it's also just, you'll notice that the speed of dissemination of information has completely changed. Like, I remember I was on some website the other day, and I saw a note on Twitter from Mark Benioff, he's the CEO of the company Salesforce, that Steve Jobs had passed away, or that the AP was reporting that he had passed away. And I mean, and this was just like literally like probably 45 minutes after it happened. And I was just thinking, my gosh, like, in the past, like 10, 15 years ago, you would see things like this, but you'd see them the next day in the newspaper. Yeah. I mean, now this stuff within just minutes. You're like, my gosh, like, how is this even possible?
And if you're an organization, especially if you're a publicly traded company, you need to be on top of that. You need to be very transparent. Otherwise, that rumor mill just will sink you, I imagine.
Yeah, it's also easy to reach out and correct things too. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's positives and negatives, but I think we're going a little too deeply into the public relations side of it, and maybe not enough into the collaboration side of it. I mean, there's so many examples right now of companies that are finally able to do what their customers truly want, and I think the whole reason for social customer management is to really let your enterprise or your company, whether it's a big company or a small kung fu studio, to let it be driven by customer intent. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients is this martial arts place, Soja. They're based in Oakland, California. They're kind of a medium-sized martial arts studio. It's sojamartialarts.com, and they got requests on the social web from folks who just wanted to do plain old self-defense, not fancy kung fu of any kind. So as a result, bam, they got a self-defense class that's 3 hours long this weekend. So I mean, it can be even little things like creating a one-time new product offering. I mean, where do you think Ben and Jerry's got all of their new ice cream flavors?
Yeah, got them from the crowd.
From the crowd. So it's
interesting.
And granted, the crowd's not right all the time. You might look at the crowd's ideas and be like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. We're not doing that." But at least now you have the valve where you can hear it.
I don't know where I read this, but someone had compared the different ways of communicating to a ripple versus a splash. Have you ever heard that analogy?
No.
So basically, when you have a Q&A with a client, and it's a one-on-one Q&A, so somebody contacts you by phone or emails you, and then you answer that email, and you might CC one or two other people in that response. It's a problem, let's say, and you've answered that problem. That's typically a splash reaction. This online sort of networking and an exchange, a forum-based exchange, turns that transaction into a ripple, because if someone were to ask that same question in an open forum and were answered in that open forum, that person would be answered. Anybody associated with the company would see the question and answer. Anyone else who's interested in the subject matter at that time would be able to participate in an answer. And in future, anyone on the internet who has a similar question could post that question and have an answer instantly through that sort of open findability. Similar kind of approach to social CRM, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to reach out to a large base at any one time, I mean, you have to be comfortable knowing that there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to come in. And there's brands that whenever a brand or even a person puts anything out there, they have to know that whatever they put out, they're going to get stuff in return that may or may not be what they want, and they have to equip themselves with the technology to manage that. And I think there's a lot of companies that jump into social media feed first and don't understand this.
It's I always make it akin to, you go to a movie theater and you go fire and everyone runs for the door and they all get stuck, right? But the concept behind it is, you don't. There's a lot of people out there that don't understand what they're doing and the power of actually starting to engage with people too, right? So
yeah, they don't understand the day-to-day ramifications of what it takes to support that. Like, imagine if you had a sales team that only communicated with customers via email, and then you suddenly purchased 5 phone lines from the phone company, but you didn't staff anyone to answer those phone lines, and then you published the phone number on all of your literature and business cards and such. The phones are going to start ringing.
Yeah, and you have to be ready to answer them. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's just another channel. Yeah. I don't understand why why someone would say, oh well, gosh, I don't think we can put a full-time resource on this. I'm like, well, do you have a full-time resource on email? And they're like, oh yeah, our whole company's on email. And then you're like, well, do you have a full-time resource on the telephone? Oh yeah, well, everyone has a telephone. Okay, well, it sounds like you're gonna need a full-time resource on this, or don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we were talking earlier about, the implementation and what kind of systems tie into social CRM. Obviously, sure. I would say that, and I'm going to take the social out. I know CRMs, CRMs and ERPs, for example, if not
Wait, what do these acronyms stand for? You're acronyming us to death.
Yeah, okay, well, yes, okay, sorry, yeah, we should clarify the client relationship management or the enterprise resource planning stuff. Any larger system or anything that goes into a company, if not properly planned, is destined for failure. I forget, especially on the enterprise resource planning side, it's about
the failure rate can be 40 to 60%.
Yeah, and it's astronomical. What are the things that you see that really kill a CRM process or a social CRM process in an organization?
Actually, funny you should ask. I wrote an entire chapter about it. It's the 14th chapter of my book. I was thinking, who is the biggest expert in the world on CRM failure? There's one guy, actually. His name is Michael Krigsman. He's based in Boston, and he writes for ZDNet. He has this column. The title is horrible. It's Black Box, like when a plane crashes.
Yeah. Ouch.
So basically all Michael writes about is IT failures of all kinds, be they enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management. And so I'm just going to read you, the 3 primary reasons that these things fail. And this is straight from the mouth of Michael. He's on Twitter, he's M. Krigsman. He's a great guy to follow. Just basically on any project that you don't want to fail, whether it's IT or not. So there's 3 things. The first one is poor strategy. So, like, basically, if the company doesn't have clear plans, goals, and objectives, that's the first thing that can kill it. The second one out of the 3 is an overfocus on technology. Because, like, companies just don't focus enough. Yeah, I mean, can you buy software and install it? Sure. Just write the check and click install. But, unless there's significant change management efforts, to engage the users, it's going to be really tough to get anybody on board. And then the last thing is kind of, this may sound a little hippy-dippy, but it's managing and minimizing culture. The problem with a lot of social customer relationship management deployments is they don't take the company's culture into account. And every company in the world has a totally different culture and different cultural values. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done before doing that. Like, I got a call from a large online training company in Southern California the other day. They want to deploy something like this. The very first thing I'm going to do is just go department to department and be like, how do you feel about this? Is this something that you culturally can embrace, or your company culturally can embrace, or you think this is a terrible idea?
Well, and you know, you have to deal with data hoarding as well. A lot of people are protecting their positions, thinking they don't want to share, and they're very private about their daily work activity. Some companies just can't break that nut. Have you seen that kind of scenario?
As far as like companies people within a company not wanting to deploy a social customer relationship management solution because they're afraid that if their data is shared with other persons in the company, that it will hurt their promotion path.
They'll lose control.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's why a lot of these engagements get shut down before they happen. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, if I got that vibe from, say, the entire crew of sales managers from a company, I would say, okay, here's my strategic recommendation: do nothing.
Yeah.
And watch the competitive advantage wane as you do that, I imagine. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big reasons that companies jump headfirst into social customer relationship management. I mean, if you notice, there were like 60,000 people attending, or maybe 80,000 people attending the Salesforce Dreamforce conference in San Francisco a few weeks ago. They weren't all there to like see, Metallica play. I mean, granted, that was probably pretty cool, but I'm down for a Metallica gig anytime. But no, they were there. They were there because they wanted to know, what are the benefits, specifically the immediate benefits of having a social enterprise? And that's whether you have a company of 10,000 people, or just, let's say you own a chain of 6 restaurants and you want to make that a social enterprise. Like, I think it was Papa John's used to manage, I think it was like 200 regional pizza places using Excel spreadsheets hosted on a server. It's in the book. Like, I had to read the case study like 4 times. I'm like, Papa John's, they make like millions and millions on pizza. How could they have done this on Excel? Well, turns out they're like, you know what? We kind of want to make billions instead of millions. And they switched their business to the cloud. If you want to look at the case study, just type in Papa John's Salesforce. Let me see if I can find it.
It's interesting you say that. It's, Excel is the world's largest database, right? And it's there's so many companies. Even I used to run across it when I was owned a software company, that they would run their entire financials on Excel. We're talking like huge companies, $500 million in revenue, $1 billion in revenue, running their financials on Excel. It was just crazy.
Yeah, and it's so there's so many companies that have made the jump now to some sort of social customer relationship management platform and seen immediate results. And I mean, if you want case studies that are a little bit more neutral, I would say don't look at the vendor websites, because obviously the ones that you're going to see at Oracle's website or Salesforce's website may not be sort of like the cleanest case studies out there. If you want stuff that's a little less biased, I'd say go to the bookstore, buy books. There's 2 books on social CRM that I can think of. My book, and of course the great one that came before it, which was called CRM at the Speed of Light. And that's by my friend Paul Greenberg. He's based out of Washington, D.C. area. Mm-hmm. And there's a book called CRM at the Speed of Light. It's got a big green cover. And that also has some wonderful case studies. So between those 2 books, if you want to know if CRM is actually going to work for your company, those are the 2 that I'd read.
Do you, when you're actually in these companies, I mean, you're engaging right across the board. Do you find it really tough to get the C-level to buy off on this? Or do you find that they're a lot easier? It's just more the middle management that could create the barriers to actually implement?
Yeah, you have to remember what language everybody speaks within a company. Like, I don't know if anyone's read the Skip Miller book, Proactive Selling, but you have your managers and directors who are speaking a highly tactical language. Skip Miller calls it, they speak Spanish. Then you have your VPs who speak, they speak the language of basic value, which is usually return on investment, risk or risk mitigation, brand, which is one of the softer value points, and then of course time, how much time is saved or wasted, and Skip Miller calls that speaking Russian. And then you have your C-level executives who speak what's called Greek, and all they really care about is revenue, earned revenue before taxes, things like that, and especially profit. And so if you can manage to illustrate the value proposition of social customer relationship management to all 3 levels in the language that they correctly speak, you'll be successful. But if you try and sell fans and followers to a CEO, get out of town.
Yeah.
That's pointless.
Yeah. It's a bit of fluff that they may be looking at, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't even appeal to them. Whereas if you tell the VP of marketing, hey, listen, you're going to hit your marketing revenue goals if you deploy this solution and manage it properly, and you tell the CEO, look, profitability has increased for the following 5 companies by doing this, this, and this. Do you want to take a shot at this? And also, when you have a big company, these projects don't just go all at once. They typically go in small pilot projects and then a larger pilot. And it's more of a crawl, walk, run strategy. Yeah. Whereas a smaller company, if you and I owned 2 pet stores with 30 employees, yeah, sure, maybe we could just pull the trigger. But if you own Hewlett Packard, I don't think it's going to go off in one blast.
So are you a believer in controlling your network and running your own online forum for all of these communication methods, or do you think that the future is going to be services like Google Plus and other social networks, the Facebook evolution? Do you think those mediums are going to be so overpowering that you're not going to be able to run your own internal version of it?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think my answer is both. I have no preference, and I think the way to look at this is take a look at a company like Autodesk. They're a real good example. They're our neighbors right up the road. If you know anyone who's an architect or anyone who's an engineer or anyone who does 3D design, you mention the phrase Autodesk, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, of course, I use it every day." They make the building you're standing in right now was probably designed using an Autodesk project if the building is newer than like 1990. Mm-hmm. And so they're a company. Then if you go to Autodesk.com, you'll look at where it says community, and you will be blown away by the amount of user communities and forums they have and how vital and vibrant they are. But then if you look on the right side of the page, you're like, they also connect to the outside world too. Like Autodesk has 25,000 people they're engaging with on a minute-to-minute basis on Twitter, a zillion on Facebook, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. They have wikis, they have dozens of blogs of their own. So it's the answer, generally speaking, if you have a large amount of customers, is, well, both. Mm. It's not enough to just have, your own online forums where you can, you can manage the conversation. But there's also going to be things that your customers want where they don't feel like knocking on your door and coming in. They might just want to talk about it on their turf. You have to be, just like a therapist has to meet the client where they are, a consultant needs to meet the client where they are, a business on the social web has to meet the customer where they are.
Yeah, you have to already have a basic understanding of where your customer is, and then if you're engage them in that world.
If you're not in acceptance around that, I mean, this may sound like very Buddhist kind of principle, but if your company is not in acceptance around where the customer is, how are you going to have a loving relationship with that customer?
Gotcha.
Chris, I think we should wrap it up. We are at almost an hour here.
Yeah, we are. One of the things, Adam, I would like to say is just kind of give you a bit of a space here to just, if people want to contact you, reach out to you, and I know you've got some wonderful things to share with people that are viewing this. First of all, where should people get a hold of you? Should they go to your website?
Sure, yeah. So it depends what you want. If you want, there's actually this $520 audio course that we just wanted to give away to people. It's an 8-hour audio course, and of course you can ask me questions on our free teleclasses. So I'll give you the URL for that. Absolutely. Maybe you could post it on the screen. It's metz.customerhub.net. So if you go there, if you go to metz.customerhub.net, you can register for free, and then you'll get all of our audio courses, and you can just listen to them in the car or on your iPod.
That's .net, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, metz.customerhub.net. And then if you want to download a couple of free chapters from the new book, I made about a half-hour MP3 for you to listen to. But that's just at adammetz.com. That's ADAMMETZ.com. And there's another ebook there called The Metz Way that you can download too. It's about 30 pages long. So that'll give you a lot of stuff to listen to and read, and it'll teach you about not just social customer management, but having passionate relationships with your customers and actually just being passionate about what you do for a living, and also how to get to that if you're not currently there. So that's a good way to reach me. And of course, you can email me from the website, just adammetz.com.
What about anyone trying to engage you in potential consulting here and stuff like that? We'd like to give you a bit of on that too. So.
Sure, yeah, just adammetz.com. You can ping me on Twitter too. It's just I'm the Metz on Twitter. I'm pretty easy guy to find, and you can call me at 510-854-METZ.
Well, what we'll do is we'll follow up here with a link to that course and some of the links to your material, and of course a link to the actual book where people can. Now, is your book is available in hardback, but is it also available in audiobook or?
Yeah. So the deal is this. It's funny that you mentioned that. anyone who's thinking of buying the book for the next 6 days before October 20th, sit tight, actually. Don't buy the book until the 20th. Here's the reason. If you go to socialcustomerbook.com, we're giving away $1,000 worth of free stuff only if you buy the book on October 20th. It's only for 1 day. So it's socialcustomerbook.com. So if you want, download the first couple chapters and chill out with those, but sit tight. Don't buy the book until next Thursday. And then as far as paperback goes, I have a hunch it'll probably come out in paperback next summer.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
And in the meantime, it should be out on the Amazon Kindle and the Barnes & Noble Nook within a week.
Okay.
If it's not, it was up. The Kindle version was up the other day, but I think Amazon made some edits to it, so it should be back up on Kindle rather shortly.
Gotcha.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining today.
Of course.
It's great, and of course, this is going to be a rebroadcast, so all of that information will be available leading up to that great signature moment of your official book promotion. So we'll obviously be leading people over to that when they come and register and watch this rebroadcast.
Awesome.
Any?
Well, thanks so much, Chris and Kirsten. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I hope everybody who reads The Social Customer is able to look at it and just make a quick decision on whether this is something that's good and profitable for your company, or if not, Harry Potter awaits.
Yeah, and we really appreciate your give forward attitude. That's key, and it's symbolic of your beliefs with regards to using this kind of technology.
And as I'm holding it up again, and I'm looking, I see you got my buddy Jeffrey Gittimer, who's got an endorsement on the back here. So it's if Jeffrey says it's good, it's got to be good.
Look at all those notes that Chris has in that book.
I actually, you know what, I really
sticking out of it.
I thought this was a great book. Especially, I'm gonna plug the sales and marketing side of it, right? Because I mean, if you're listening and you're hearing out there, we often say it's a great source of trying to figure out how to get sales leads or try to engage in that kind of process, right? Yeah. And that's, to me, is just one of the most ultimates on going down this path, right?
And I think it's way cheaper to keep your current customers than it is to go out and get new ones. I think it's 5 times more pricey to go out and score a new customer than it is to sell to a current customer.
Yeah,
so it's like why not just keep the awesome customers you have, and this book will just tell you how to do that.
That's your mantra, Chris, right there. Best is the referrals, and keep them happy.
You betcha.
Thanks very much, Adam.
Thank you. Talk to you guys soon.
You betcha. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Well, that's great.